In the far reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy, beyond the sight of even Earth's most powerful telescopes, the Valkyria homeworld gleamed like a jewel among the stars. This planet, named Thala, was the heart of a sprawling empire ruled by an ancient race of warrior women. These women were known as the Valkyria, towering figures of strength and discipline, bred for battle and conquest. Their society was built upon the core principles of honor, war, and dominance. For centuries, they had expanded their territory, conquering planets, solar systems, and even whole star clusters. Few races dared to challenge them. At the head of this mighty empire was General Arena, a fearsome leader whose name was whispered with awe across the galaxy. With her flowing silver hair, piercing violet eyes, and skin the color of the deep ocean, she was a commanding presence. Her battle record was spotless. She had led the Valkyria through countless victories, and her name was synonymous with invincibility. But now, the Valkyria were bored. They had defeated every major opponent in their sector, leaving them with no worthy adversaries. It was in this boredom that Arena had agreed to a peculiar mission, a reconnaissance trip to an insignificant planet on the fringes of their maps. Earth. Earth, Arena said, sitting in her command chair aboard the sleek silver battle cruiser. Leia, what a pitiful little rock. Indeed, General Sora, her second-in-command, replied with a smirk. Sora was nearly as tall as Arena, her frame wrapped in gleaming black armor. It barely registers as a threat. Their technology is primitive. Their defenses laughable. They're no more advanced than the lizards we wiped out on Chloros. Arena glanced at the holographic map displaying Earth and its neighboring planets. To her, it was just a speck, a small blue floating in the vastness of space. She knew Earth's history, a planet torn by wars and conflict, populated by a species that had barely managed to escape their atmosphere in flimsy metal capsules. Compared to the Valkyria, who had mastered faster-than-light travel eons ago, humans were little more than children playing with toys. They call their kind humans? Arena mused aloud, her tone dripping with amusement. They sound so fragile, so insignificant. How they've managed to survive this long in the cosmos is beyond my understanding. The other Valkyria on the bridge chuckled in agreement. They had been monitoring Earth's communications, its broadcasts and signals. They found humanity's obsession with entertainment, material wealth, and trivial conflicts laughable. The Valkyria, in contrast, lived for the thrill of battle and the pursuit of victory. Arena rose from her chair, her violet eyes gleaming. We shall pay them a visit. They may not be worthy of our conquest, but it will be amusing to see their faces when they realize just how small they are in the grand scheme of the universe. With a simple hand gesture, Arena commanded the Veloria to descend. The ship hummed to life, its engines glowing as it accelerated toward Earth. The vessel was a thing of beauty and terror, a sleek war machine equipped with technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. It shimmered as it cut through the void, its cloaking field allowing it to pass undetected through Earth's defense systems. As the ship neared the outer atmosphere, the crew gathered on the bridge, eagerly awaiting their first glimpse of this primitive world. A holographic view of Earth appeared before them, a swirl of blue oceans, green land masses, and white clouds. They are so unaware, Sora sneered, her arms folded across her chest. We could destroy them all before they even knew we were here. Arena, however, wasn't interested in destruction. Not yet, at least. Let them see us first. Let them feel the weight of our presence. The Veloria pierced through the atmosphere, its cloaking field shimmering and dropping away as it descended toward Earth. The ship sliced through the sky like a falling star, its sleek metallic body gleaming in the sunlight. The Valkyria watched with amusement as Earth's primitive radar systems began to pick up their presence. Alarms blared across military bases, and jets were scrambled to intercept. They think their machines can stop us? Sora laughed. How quaint. Within minutes, the Veloria hovered above one of Earth's largest cities, New York. Its enormous shadow blotted out the sun, casting the city below into a state of confusion and panic. The ship's engines emitted a low, humming vibration that rattled windows and shook buildings. On the streets, people looked up in horror and awe. Thousands gathered, staring at the colossal spacecraft that had suddenly appeared above their heads. Some ran, terrified of the unknown. Others stood frozen, unable to comprehend the sight before them. Irina stood at the front of the ship, her gaze fixed on the tiny figures below. The humans were as small and insignificant as she had imagined, scurrying about like ants under her feet. She found it almost humorous. "Open the bay doors," Irina commanded, her voice calm. The enormous bay doors at the bottom of the ship slowly slid open with a hiss, and a ramp extended to the ground below. Irina, Sora, and several of the elite Valkyria warriors marched down the ramp, their massive forms and shining armor creating an imposing spectacle. They moved with grace and power, every step purposeful, their eyes cold and calculating. As they reached the street, the crowd backed away, whispering in fear. The humans had never seen anything like the Valkyria before. These tall, blue-skinned warriors with eyes that glowed like stars. For a moment, there was only silence, the air thick with tension. Then Irina spoke, her voice booming through the city. "People of Earth, we are the Valkyria, conquerors of the stars. We have come to witness your world, though it is barely worth our attention. Look upon us, and know that you are nothing in the grand scheme of the universe." Her words echoed through the streets, causing murmurs of fear and confusion to ripple through the crowd. The Valkyria warriors smirked, enjoying the humans' terrified reactions. "They are so fragile," Sora whispered, her eyes scanning the crowd. "So pathetic." But as Irina surveyed the humans, her gaze was drawn to something unexpected. A figure standing still amidst the chaos. A man, unlike the others, was watching them with a calm, almost defiant look in his eyes. He didn't run or cower like the others. Instead, he stood tall, his eyes locked on hers. "Interesting," Irina muttered, her curiosity piqued. This human was different. Perhaps Earth was not as pathetic as she had thought. Forward, cutting through the crowd with Sora by her side. As they approached, the humans instinctively moved back, creating a wide circle around the Valkyria and the mysterious man who now stood in their center. For a brief moment, the city fell silent, the weight of the encounter palpable. "Asterisk you!" Irina called out, her voice echoing down the empty streets. "What is your name, Earthling?" The man met her gaze without flinching. "David Kane," he said, his voice firm but calm. Irina studied him for a moment, intrigued by his composure. He was different from the others, and there was something about him that stirred a strange sense of curiosity in her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in ages. Most beings cowered in her presence, but this one, he seemed almost amused. "You seem remarkably calm for someone standing before the most powerful warrior race in the galaxy," Irina said, folding her arms across her chest. "Do you not fear us?" David shrugged casually, as though discussing the weather. "I've seen a lot in my time. Fear doesn't change anything." Sora stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "You speak too boldly for a man whose people are at our mercy," she growled. "Show respect before we show you how truly insignificant you are." David's lips quirked into a slight smile. "Respect is earned, not demanded." The crowd, still watching from a safe distance, gasped at his words. The Valkyria were renowned for their ruthlessness, and no one expected a human, especially an ordinary one, to talk back to them. Yet David seemed unfazed by the towering warriors before him, and his words carried a weight that unsettled Irina, if only slightly. "You dare to challenge us?" Irina asked, her voice cold but edged with curiosity. "Do you not realize what we could do to your world?" "I realize it," David said, his voice unwavering. "But I also know that strength isn't just about size or power. It's about will. I've faced enemies before, and I've learned one thing. If you don't stand your ground, you've already lost." Irina was silent for a moment, considering his words. There was something undeniably different about him. He was no ordinary human. There was strength in his stance, a quiet confidence that resonated with her on a deeper level. She had never met a being from such a primitive world who displayed such fearlessness in the face of overwhelming odds. Sora, however, was less impressed. "Shall we crush him, General?" she asked, her tone mocking. "Show these earthlings what happens when they forget their place." But Irina shook her head, raising her hand to stop Sora. "No, he interests me." Sora blinked, surprised. "This earthling? He is nothing." Irina's gaze remained locked on David, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Perhaps, but I want to see what this one is capable of." The crowd murmured, confused by Irina's unexpected interest. David remained calm, but even he could sense the shifting dynamics in the air. The tension was no longer purely about fear or domination. Irina wasn't just mocking him. She was testing him. She stepped closer, her imposing figure towering over him. "Tell me, David Kane," she said slowly, her voice lowering to a more personal tone. "Why should I not simply take your world and leave it in ruins?" David held her gaze. "Because it's not as weak as you think." Sora scoffed, but Irina raised her hand again, silencing her. She studied David for a long moment, and then, in an unexpected move, she extended her arm toward him, offering him a challenge. "Prove it," she said. David glanced at her hand, then back into her glowing violet eyes. He could feel the eyes of every Valkyra and human on the street, watching, waiting to see what he would do. The odds were stacked against him, and yet he wasn't afraid. There was something in Irina's eyes, a spark of mutual respect, that hinted at possibilities he hadn't expected. He reached out and took her hand. In that moment, something shifted. The balance of power between the Valkyra and Earth was no longer a simple game of domination. Irina had found a human who intrigued her, one who had the potential to challenge her preconceptions. As she released David's hand, she turned to Sora and her soldiers. "Hold your positions," she commanded. "We'll see if this planet is truly as weak as we thought." And with that, the Valkyra, who had arrived with mockery in their hearts, now found themselves on the verge of something far more complex, an encounter that would forever change the way they saw Earth and its people. The atmosphere was electric. The heart of New York City had transformed into an arena of anticipation. Here is the corrected version of the text. They emerged from their hiding places, unsure of what to do now that the impossible encounter had ended. David Kane stood in the middle of the street, still feeling the weight of everything that had just transpired. He had faced one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy and lived to tell the tale. More than that, he had earned her respect. The memory of Irina's violet eyes meeting his, just before they parted, lingered in his mind. She was no ordinary enemy. In fact, she wasn't an enemy at all anymore. Around him, military personnel and law enforcement officers moved quickly to secure the area. Sirens wailed in the distance, and helicopters hovered above, keeping watch. David could see groups of government officials and scientists already descending on the scene, eager to piece together what had just happened. But David knew this was only the beginning. An officer approached him, looking dazed but composed. "David Kane, sir, the president has requested an immediate briefing. You need to come with us." David nodded, though his mind was still spinning from the encounter. As he followed the officer to a waiting convoy, he caught one last glimpse of the sky, wondering if the Valkyra were still up there watching. Hours later, David found himself standing in the Oval Office. The weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. The President of the United States, along with several top military officials and advisors, were seated around him, listening intently as David recounted every detail of his duel with General Irina. The air in the room was thick with tension. "So, you're telling me that these Valkyra decided not to invade because you won some kind of fight?" one of the generals asked skeptically. "It wasn't about winning," David replied calmly. "It was about proving that Earth isn't as weak as they thought. Irina wasn't looking for a war. She was looking to test us, to see if we were worth her time." The president leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the desk. "And what do you believe? Do you think this General Arena can be trusted?" David paused, considering the question carefully. "Yes," he said finally. "Ido. She may be a warrior, but she's not reckless. She respects strength, and she respects those who stand up for themselves. If we approach them with respect and show them that we're willing to cooperate, I think we can avoid any conflict." A murmur rippled through the room as the advisors exchanged glances. The idea of negotiating with an alien race was both thrilling and terrifying. Earth had never been in a situation like this before. The president nodded, absorbing the information. "And you think we should initiate formal diplomacy with these Valkyra?" "I think it's our best chance," David replied. "They didn't come here to destroy us. If we handle this right, we might have an opportunity to form an alliance, one that could change the future of our world." The president sat back in his chair, deep in thought. Finally, he looked up. "Very well. We'll proceed cautiously. I want our top diplomats working on this immediately. David, you've done an incredible service for your country and for the world. We'll need you to remain closely involved in these discussions." David nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what his role would be going forward. He had never imagined that one day he'd be negotiating peace with alien warriors. But the world had changed in a matter of hours, and nothing felt certain anymore. As the meeting adjourned, David walked out of the Oval Office, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. Outside the White House, the media frenzy was already in full swing. Reporters clamored for information, eager to hear every detail about the first confirmed encounter with extraterrestrial life. But David was too drained to pay them much attention. All he wanted was some quiet. Far above Earth, aboard the Valoria, General Arena stood before a holographic display, her eyes focused on the image of Earth below. She had returned to her command post, but her thoughts were still on the man she had faced earlier that day, David Kane. In all her years of conquest and battle, no one had ever made her question her assumptions the way he had. Sora approached from behind, her expression tense. "The High Command has received our report, General. They are perplexed by your decision to halt the invasion." Arena turned slowly, her face calm but firm. Perplexed, Sora nodded. "They do not understand why you would choose diplomacy over domination. Some members of the Council are concerned that Earth may not be worthy of our time." Arena's gaze hardened. "Then they are fools. Earth is more than it appears. I have seen something in its people, in their will to survive, their resilience. They are not like the other species we have encountered." Sora hesitated. "Do you truly believe they could be valuable allies?" Arena considered this for a moment. "Perhaps. They have strength that goes beyond physical power. If they can harness that strength, they may become a force worth aligning with. The Valkyra have ruled through conquest for centuries, but perhaps it is time we sought out partnerships instead of enemies." Sora's brow furrowed. "The Council may resist such ideas. Let them," Arena said coolly. "I will not ignore what I have learned here. Earth has potential, and I intend to see what that potential holds." There was a long silence between them before Sora finally spoke again. "What of this human, David Kane? You seem particularly interested in him." Arena's expression softened slightly, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "He is different. He is a warrior in his own way, though not in the way we expected. He understands strength, not as brute force, but as determination and adaptability. I believe he may be the key to understanding Earth." Sora looked skeptical but did not argue. "What will our next move be?" "We will return to Thaler and report to the Council. Then we will open formal channels with Earth's leaders. This is no longer a conquest, Sora. This is a beginning of something new." Days later, back on Earth, David Kane found himself standing in front of an international delegation. Representatives from the United Nations, heads of state, and scientists from every corner of the globe had gathered to discuss the Valkyra. David had been asked to speak, not as a soldier, but as a diplomat. The man who had faced down an alien general and brokered peace. "The world is watching. one of the diplomats said to him as they prepared for the session. "You've become a symbol of hope for billions." David smiled, though the weight of those words was not lost on him. "I didn't do this alone," he said quietly. "We all have a part to play in what comes next." As the session began, David stood before the assembly, feeling the eyes of the world upon him. The Valkyria had not returned since their departure, but communication channels had been established. The first steps toward diplomacy had been taken, and humanity now stood on the threshold of a new era, one filled with possibility, but also uncertainty. "The Valkyria are not our enemies," David began, his voice steady and clear. "They are warriors, yes, but they are also beings capable of reason and respect. They came here expecting to find weakness, but what they found was resilience. And because of that, we have an opportunity to forge a future not defined by fear, but by cooperation." The room was silent, every word hanging in the air. As we move forward, we must remember that strength isn't just about power. It's about standing together, about finding common ground even when the odds seem insurmountable. The Valkyria have given us a chance, and it's up to us to make the most of it. Applause erupted from the assembly. David stepped back, the weight of the moment finally lifting from his shoulders. He had no way of knowing what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Earth was no longer alone in the universe. As the applause continued, David allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. His eyes drifted upward toward the sky, where he imagined the Valkyria watching from their distant homeworld. He wondered if, somewhere, Arena was looking back at Earth with the same sense of curiosity and hope. Far beyond the stars, aboard the Valoria, General Arena stood on the command deck, gazing at a holographic image of Earth. She smiled faintly, her thoughts returning to the day she had met David Kane. "Until we meet again," she whispered softly. The ship's engines roared to life, and the Valkyria vessel shot forward into the infinite expanse of space, leaving Earth behind, but not forgotten.